Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Uh-oh. Does Mark Powell have no audio? What's up, Mark?
Hi, guys. Can everyone
There
hear
you
me?
go. Yes.
Yeah, I'm here. Finally, all the technology works. Great to see you guys.
Same here.
So,
Nice to see you.
how's everyone doing?
Good. Hanging in there, you know.
Yep, all good here.
Excellent. So, let's start off with some introductions. Demis, you're on the left of my screen. So, do you want to just give a bit of an introduction about yourself?
Sure, okay. So for our audience, my name is Demis Farrugia. I'm a Maltese citizen. I live on the beautiful archipelago of the Maltese Islands in Europe. And I've been a TDI-SDI instructor for the past 2 years. I'm a freelance instructor based here locally on Malta and Gozo. And I've been diving overall for the past 7.5 years now.
Excellent. And all right, Jason, what about yourself?
So I am about 2 years now. I've been an SDI, TDI instructor trainer. I've been an instructor for about 10 years. I live in just outside Syracuse, New York, in a place called Camillus. Pretty much famous for Camillus cutlery knives. There's a knife. There was a knife factory down by us. That's pretty world renowned for that. But I've been diving for 14 years, I believe, and instructing for 10.
Excellent. And last but not least, Mark, what about you?
Hi, everybody. Mark Rowe. I'm based in, living in Lanzarote. I'm ex-military, 28 years Royal Engineers in the British Army. Diving for 30 years. I'm an instructor for 13 years now. And I completed my SDI, TDI instructor trainer last year. So very happy to be here.
I remember it well. It was a great 10 days.
It was good.
So we've got a good selection on the live stream today. We've got independent instructors. We've got instructors that are working for big dive centers. We've got Malta, Lanzarote, the UK, the US. So hopefully we should have a good balanced discussion. And so today I want to talk about buoyancy. And well, the title is "Should it be taught in an open water course?" I think that's a pretty easy answer. Yes, of course. But specifically, how should it be taught? And more than that, I want to talk about whether we should be teaching all of the skills neutrally buoyant. So first of all, let's start off with what we're doing at the moment. So Jason, are you teaching open water with all the skills neutrally buoyant at the moment?
Yes, absolutely. Every single one is neutrally buoyant that we're teaching.
And roughly how many open water students did you do last year?
We do about 30 per year, somewhere between 30 and 50, with about 200 overall certifications.
Okay. What about you, Mark? Are you teaching with skills neutrally buoyant, and just rough number of students taught at your center?
Yes, we are teaching neutrally buoyant. Not all the skills. That's a question for later. About 95% of the skills are taught neutrally buoyant. And I think last year we did around 200 open water students at the dive center amongst all the team of divers, about 20 of my own.
Okay, and Demis, what about yourself?
Okay, so in my case, open water, yes, all skills, even the preliminary dives, are all taught off the bottom, so neutrally buoyant. And overall, last year, I did around 4 open water dive courses. And in total, I've done around 8 certifications as a freelance instructor.
Okay, so I think that's the first point that we want to make. You know, this is happening. It's not a question of whether this is possible. If we've got small, medium, and large dive centers that are doing it, it is happening. So anyone I think that says it's not possible. Well, yeah, these guys are actually doing it. So Demis, obviously, I think you've answered this already because you're a new instructor, so you've been doing this pretty much from the start. But Mark and Jason, let's start off with Mark. How long have you been teaching this way?
Pretty much since I went full-time dive pro about 8 years ago. I've been doing this this way. I was taught to teach on my knees initially. Initially, I was a BZAC instructor in those foundation courses, and what I learned was to do it on the knees, mainly because of control. But there was a better way.
Yeah. So for me, it was I've been teaching
Okay.
for 10. Okay, good. So I've been teaching for about 10 years, and past 4 or so, we've been really, truly committed to neutral buoyancy. There was about a year of transition between the two. So 5 years teaching on my knees, which is the way we learned, and then kind of a transition year, seeing what worked, what didn't work. And now with reaping the benefits that we've seen, we converted everything straight over and put a little more time in at the beginning.
Okay. So yeah, I think we'll come back to some of the challenges, but before we get on to the challenges, what is it that made you switch? Why did you want to move away from the on the knees style? So what was it that drove you to this approach? Jason, do you want to carry on?
Sure. Essentially, we were trying to figure out a way to do continuing education. And as we were doing continuing education, we were having challenges with continuing education and really, truly having proficient skills. And some of the extension became a little bit more complex. And we've seen it run the gamut throughout the entire thing, all the way through technical. And as we started teaching some of the more advanced courses, seeing that our foundation wasn't there. So we started kind of looking back and having discussions about how we might get a little bit better and a little more prepared for our students. So we tried a couple different things, and as we were trying them, part of that was the flexibility of SDI standards. When we switched over from PADI to SDI, we had a change of kind of mentality on the classes, and that allowed us a little bit more flexibility, and we started kind of growing within that scope.
Excellent.
And Mark, what about yourself? What is it that drove you down this route?
Comes down to trying to find a better way, a more efficient way. I think people think knees is easy because of control, and yes, it is. There is that view of there is control there. The problem is, as soon as you want to move that new diver, there is no control, and you haven't given him any of the skills yet to enable him to move, to dive. So we've done some skills. I want to move him, practice swimming. What's it feel like to be a diver? Suddenly everything got difficult. He's floundering, all arms. He doesn't understand breath control. If he breathes in hard because he's a little stressed, then he's on the surface because we're not deep. One up, all up, I lose time. It's a better way. Added to that is a buzzword that's around now, which is primacy, which is once I am a trained diver, I'm going to revert to what I know. One of my foundation core skill learning is when something goes wrong. And that is, if I need to clear my mask as a relatively new diver, first thing I want to look for is a bit of sand and go and park my backside in it so I can clear my mask. Actually, what I should be doing is just doing it where I am. And there should be no stress with that. And that's what I'm seeing already, is allowing divers to complete skills which are a little more challenging initially, but the benefits are massive later on where you get that time back, because now the diver can move when you want him to move. And he understands when you say, breathe out a little bit and come down to my level, he does that instantly. He doesn't look at you like, you've got two heads or anything else. So yeah, for me, it works really well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The point about primacy. We in instructor courses, we tell people about this concept, and then we go and do something different. So yeah, great point. Now, Demis, you've come from this from a slightly different point of view, because these guys, they were already teaching one way. They saw some disadvantages and they decided to choose. But for you, presumably you had a choice. When you did your instructor course, you could have gone to an agency or an instructor that was teaching in the sort of traditional on the knees style, but you chose right from the beginning to go this style. So talk us through your thought process. Why did you want to start off in this way?
Okay, to tell you a bit of what Mark was previously mentioning, in my case, I'm a firm believer of future-proofing divers. So basically from the get-go, you immediately put them with the concepts of buoyancy, trim, and propulsion, which I am a firm believer that they go in together. And to go back to your point, Mark, right before I decided to become an instructor back in 2018, I was already a technical diver, both for back mount and side mount. And obviously I had sought proper tuition back then and started to appreciate the importance of being taught correctly. I mean, and that's where the aspects of being correctly weighted, the lung volume control, the breathing patterns, etc. And when this, this goal of mine to become an instructor came to mind, obviously I decided that as much as I did in the past, obviously I'm going to seek proper tuition and choose my instructor trainer accordingly. So I enrolled in the SDI IDC. And, after that, once I qualified, etc., I made sure that what I learned in the past, I make sure that I take it on with me and future-proof drivers so that going forward, as they progress through other courses, etc., the foundations are always obviously instilled from the get-go.
Yeah, I think that future-proofing, which is a nice way of summing up, I think what Mark was saying about, being able to get divers to actually dive. That's a critical concept. Okay, so we've talked about why we want to do this, and I think Mark, you hinted at some of the challenges. So do you want to start off and just give an idea of how do you do it? How do you approach an open water course if you're teaching skills neutrally buoyant?
So once we're in the water, it's first time in the water, possibly. We're only at 1.5 meters deep, standing depth. It's safety first. So breathing at the surface, then down into the dive prone position. They are going to be negative initially, but not on the knees, they're in the prone position. Use the inflator, adjust, and they're pretty on fin tip still, not neutrally buoyant yet. What I'm going to do now is teach for safety is that mass clear and that regulator clearing, regulator retrieval. That allows, if the student has a problem, knocks his own regulator out, mass has got water in it, they know what to do from that very first point. So once that foundation's set, then all I'm doing, a little bit of weight check, how to use the inflator for him, for the students, to feel the BCD inflation, feel lung control. After that, it's just buoyancy. I do nothing else on that first confined section underwater. I only do buoyancy now. So what I'm looking at is breath control, breath awareness, like riding a bike. Let them feel it, that rise and fall as they go up and down. Lift the feet up. Initially, again, feet might be down a little bit still. We're still, or fin tips, but we're trying to get them off the bottom. Awareness of that breath control, and then basically they're going to come off the bottom. Overinflate, so take a larger breath, you see them come up, and then a larger breath, and they come down. If a hat puts a hand down, remember this is literally first 20 minutes in the water, say, puts a hand down, it doesn't matter, it's just a hand. Yeah, go back when we need to, on the surface, talk through things again. We're still only in 1.5 meters of water maximum. We're in the ocean, by the way. I don't do anything in the pool here. We have a confined area in the ocean. Then use the BCD inflator, establish neutral buoyancy themselves, let all the air out again, go through that skill again and again and again, repeat it until they're neutrally buoyant with lung control, then let that out again, repeat. Remind them to move less. Yeah, less is more. So keep the arms still if they need to. Yeah, all these things make them move more. We know that from other students. That's why planting somebody on their knees, people think it's easy. They can move their arms and they're not going to move anywhere. But now moving less is important. after we've got some buoyancy and everything else, not going to do anything else. What I'm going to do is increase the depth a little bit, and we're going to go for a little swim, side by side, or left and right if I've got two students. Come more into that a bit later. And we're going to increase the depth a little bit, allow them to adjust their buoyancy. Again, now I've got greater depth. If they're rising up a little bit, I just say, you breathe out, come down to my level, wait to see that, feel that effect. And it's literally a 5-minute swim round, changing depth, allowing them to change their buoyancy first with lungs and then with the BCD if needed. Key to that all is correct weighting. I'm a bit of a weight Nazi. I hate overweighted divers. Once we've done that, we're going to return to the start, depth. They're going to correct their buoyancy. We're going to repeat those initial skills of mass clearing and reg clearing, but now we're going to do the neutral. And then we're going to continue from there. Again, the student can always put a hand down, put a leg down. That happens. Even some of our instructors do that in shallow water. Yeah, what we're trying to do is get them to feel from the very beginning that initial, I feel like a diver, an awareness of their depth and their lung control. And that's really all I'm doing on Confined 1. So I'll let somebody else speak, and that's probably enough for now.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary of how to start. Jason, anything you do differently, or do you take the same approach?
Yeah, for the most part, we do it almost identical, but we do initially we'll do some stuff on the surface, no mask on, reg in your mouth, and put your face in the water to get used to not having a mask on type stuff, which is fairly standard practice, I think. One of the things we have found that goes along with all of this is we put the octo or the safe second, or however you want to do it, on a necklace around the neck, and then the primary in your mouth. You donate the primary. We do a lot of primacy stuff on setting them up that way. So when we put them into the water, our students lay down on their bellies initially. We spend, just like Mark, a ton of time on waiting. That is the primary foundation to this whole thing. Let's make sure you're properly weighted. So we put them on their belly and teach them same two skills, mask clearing stuff, and then reg recovery. What we do with reg recovery might be a little bit different. When you pull that reg out to recover the other one, you put your octo right in, teaching them to basically look at their problem set and figure out which one's the most important. The most important is out of air. Solve your out of air, then find your reg. Then we talk about the fact that while they're doing that, what they're doing is they're taking breaths in and out on those, and they're starting to figure out, I'm hitting the bottom, I'm up off the bottom, I'm hitting the bottom, I'm up off the bottom. So they're figuring out their own breath control. And within about 10 minutes of doing those skills, they've already kind of figured out their buoyancy a little bit. Like, they're not great at it, but they're figuring out breath control works. Two of the things we do, we have a pool. We use pools. We have one of the buoyancy diamonds from day one. As much as we can, we have buoyancy diamonds in there, and the students love it. They go into the buoyancy diamond, and before the end of the class, they do their math skills inside the buoyancy diamond. So they get feedback initially. So they go right into the diamond and hover inside the diamond, do their skills, because that's what we're going to ask them to do in the open water. So, well, not in the diamond, but they're going to be expected to hold their position. So they go in and then they do their skills. It's a game to them. They love it. They really want to do that. And the other thing we do is, instead of we don't do anything on fin tips. We never put anybody on fin tips. We've just found different ways of doing it. One of my instructors, Sean Bierman, when I run my IDCs, I run them as mentoring programs. So my students are required to kind of come with a different way to do some skills, like look some things up. Let's get some feedback. Let's see if you can figure out some way to do something different. So Sean Bierman came and he's like, I got this thing for hovering and breath control. And I'm like, well, let's try it. So based on lung volume, females, we put 2 2-pound weights down. For males, we put 2 3-pound weights down, and they have to grab the weight, hover above the weights, grab the weight, bring it up to their chest, take a couple of breaths with their breath control and stay in trim, neutrally buoyant. Grab the second one, bring it up to their chest, take a couple of breaths, not this up, down, throw them down. It's bring it up, take a couple of breaths, bring the other one up, take a couple of breaths, set them down. One at a time or whatever. And they love that. They ask for the weights all the time. They're like, can you put those out again? I want to work my buoyancy. Can you put those out? And we have a buoyancy night. Similar. The first night we do the buoyancy stuff. And then about three nights later, we get in, we're like, all you're doing is buoyancy. Here's the diamond. Here's the weights. Here's torpedoes, whatever you want to do. Your job is just to play with buoyancy tonight and propulsion at the same time. So it's propulsion, and we always tell them back kicking is not required to get out of open water. It's more comic relief for the instructors to watch you try to do it, but we'll help you out. So that's about, I think, only thing in addition to what Mark does that we do maybe a little bit differently.
I think there'll be a lot of my students smiling at that comment about the weights there. The weight exercise is something I've done with a lot of my students as well. So
he probably stole it from you. He has a little boy crush on you, I think.
Let's move on from that. Demis, what about you? What about you? Anything else that you include on the first couple of dives?
So day one for me is always the most interesting one. Why? Because as you can appreciate, as an instructor, you need to thoroughly understand that the student that you have in front of you, there's a very good chance that this person has never actually tried diving before. So in my case, I break it down as follows. So I see that dive one is always about addressing the anxiety the student might have. Obviously, they're new to the sport. They don't know what they're expecting. So it's up to me to ensure them that everything will go fine, as long as obviously we follow some clear instructions. So obviously, I start with a good briefing. Before that, obviously, in my case, I teach mainly on backplate and wing and long hose system, even on open water courses. I find that the results that you achieve with a backplate and wing system are truly underrated at the moment. I see many people, especially locally here, that flinch the moment I mention backplate and wing and long hose system, even at open water level. But I mean, testament to all my students' successes is to see them literally right after dive one, already starting to achieve that super nice trim and awareness of how buoyancy control is directly affected by how they breathe through their regulator. So I mainly break it down, Mark, into 3 points. As the others also mentioned, it's about in very shallow waters, focusing on mask clearance for safety reasons, obviously. Starting initially to remove a bit that second stage, gently blowing out and putting back in the mask, maybe mechanically purging that second stage, or even blowing out through the remaining gas in your lungs. And apart from that occasion, we'd start preparing a bit for the frog kick. In my case, the way I make it work is I deploy a control line from my spoon and attach a cookie, and that cookie will be their best friend for the students all throughout the open water course. And that will put awareness on them so that as they breathe up and down, or even if they move a bit that fin kick, they might come close to the cookie or actually move away from the cookie. And that will start instilling them that, hey, they really need to take this easy. This is not a race. And, just go into Zen mode. Let that mind and the lungs go into play. And apart from that, as Mark earlier mentioned, less is more. There's no need to be flutter kicking everywhere or frog kicking. Don't fin unless you actually need to fin, so to speak. Obviously, it falls into my remit that obviously that the harness is correctly tightened to the body, and also the weight placements, depending on the type of cylinder I'm using, whether it's convex steel or concave steel or aluminum tanks, whichever is available. It's up to me as the instructor to ensure that the stability is obviously there to make their students' lives as easy as possible.
Excellent. Some really good ideas there as well, and I think that's one of the comments that came up in the feed. Yeah, love the ideas, and I think we're going to have a few people borrowing those ideas. So far, it all sounds fantastic. What problems have you encountered? What are the challenges of teaching this way? Demis, do you want to carry on?
Sure. Okay. So in my case, some of the challenges, as I mentioned earlier, Mark, it's down to the anxiety. It's a given that, when you have an open water student coming, you can't expect them to, be super relaxed, etc. They're doing something that, their mind is telling them, hey, you shouldn't be underwater. You're not a fish, I've been lucky enough actually have around 3 students that, in my honest opinion, they're born naturals. And I've been very blessed to have such people literally right off the bat. You put them into the water, not even 10 minutes into it, you see that super nice Z position forming from their fins, etc. And it goes to show that, the briefing you've given them right at the beginning has really sunk in, etc. But obviously, occasionally we do find some students, in my case, that obviously are super anxious, and you can't blame them. And me, I really make a huge effort to try and remember on my first dive way back in 2013, how anxious I was. And I see it from the shoes of the student, the anxiety aspect. Why? Because the anxiety will obviously mean that they will be breathing more, and the buoyancy control will make it even more difficult for them. So, it's all about instilling anxiety and reassuring the student, hey, don't worry, I'm here to help you. All I need is you focus on me, and we'll have all plain sailing. And apart from that, obviously, the other challenge is that since I live on an island, sometimes the wind may not be in our favor. So, that might make the situation where you train slightly more difficult for the student. But at the same time, it's good experience for them.
Mark, what about you? You're in a slightly different situation, in a resort. You can literally have anybody walk through the door. So you never know what you're going to get. What sort of problems have you come across with teaching this way?
To add what's not been spoken about already with Demis, because I'm in a resort tourist location, is referral divers. So it's taking a guy or a lady that has done their confined. Now we want to move to open water skills. I've had some great referral divers, and I've had some shocking referral divers. And actually, my first question is always, were you taught neutral or were you taught on your knees in confined? Because that question allows me to know what I'm going to get. Basically, they're good at the skills. That's a given if you let them go on their knees. But when I want to move that diver and now start doing those skills in an open water scenario, deeper, as a diver, not on the bottom, that's when they get challenged. So that's a big issue for us. We get quite a lot of referral divers. Not all of our business, but a fair amount of referral divers. Some people do tri dives, so 2 or 3 tri dives before they've decided to get their open water certification. Depending on how that try, my tri divers do it the same way at dive 1 as my open water students. There is no different. They do exactly the same skills, the same way. Why? So I want to teach him safety, and I want to teach him how to use his lung control. My life then as the instructor is easy. And if a tri-diver can do it, never been in the water again with what I would call substantially less commitment than the open water diver who wants to dive as financial investment and for an activity, not just a try, and the tri-diver can do it, then anybody can do it. As far as other issues, some people fight the buoyancy, some have poor balance, poor core muscles, and therefore poor stability because of that. What I sort of explain to people, my analogy for that is riding a bike. Most people have ridden a bike, hopefully, at some time in their life, where we go out of balance, imbalance, out of balance, imbalance, out of balance. And it's that same scenario as we'll move. One initially keep still, move less, and secondly, once we'll start moving, particularly with flutter kick. I move on to frog slightly later, about confined 4 or 5. But the flutter kick, they're going to do that same balancing issue. So that's something that you need to explain. They need to use that core stability to enable this to work. Without it, it's going to be much harder. My last point really is in that sedentary life is some very large overweight divers can be more difficult with this scenario, particularly with floaty feet. I've gone out and got the ankle weights out that we never use and given them to divers because I want them to be that initial prone position and then just their feet are up behind them and they lose control, they get anxious, and the whole thing spins out of control very quickly. So ankle weights do actually help provide that initial foundation of control, of feeling back to that diver, which I find helps for those bigger divers.
Excellent. Jason, you said you had a sort of a transition period between the two styles. What were the problems you were coming across in that transition period?
Some of the issues we had is we've got a lot of silt in the area we are at, and I was taught to teach on the knees, so we put these students in control, and the visibility goes to absolute zero and becomes a nightmare. We changed it up, and we were trying to figure out a way to make it so that we could be more neutrally buoyant in the open water, moving towards that direction. But then they didn't have the foundation. A lot of people are asking, like, how can you go forward? I got to have control. These are my challenges. We spent an extra probably 10, 15 minutes the first night, which is a little bit of a challenge because of the fact that, you're taking extra time there. But if you don't take an extra time on the foundation of a house, leveling out everything else later on is going to be a nightmare. It's going to be terrible. It's going to take way more time. It's going to look sloppy. It's not going to be good. Yeah, it might be a house at the end, but it's not going to be level because you don't have the foundation that's level initially. So we take extra time to make sure that that's there. We weren't doing that prior. We were going through and it was, the partial mass flood and clear. Yeah, sure. They did it. Full mass flood and clear. Yep. Check. They did it. And check. We went through the whole checklist. We did it. We had our list. We were done. We did it in the order we were told. Every single mod was done. And then when we made the transition and could start thinking for ourselves a little bit more, we started looking at it going, why do we have to go to a platform and kneel? Why can't I just swim and ask you to do the skill? So we changed it. That was kind of, it was kind of reverse thinking, like, where do we want them to be at the end? Where do we want to be as instructors at the end of this whole thing? Well, why are we doing this at the beginning if that's not the way what we expect at the end? And it's changing expectations, which is hard for students. Especially, it's frustrating for students when they have struggles, that if you tell them they're doing one thing and they've got that down and they've fought through it, and then in the new situation you tell them you want something different, and the frustration goes through the roof and they don't want to do it. So we decided to take a blanket look at everything. Our challenges, we were used backplate and wing too. We switched over to it. We tried it. Your buoyancy comes from your lungs, a lot of it, and body tissues, but the buoyancy adjustment comes from your lungs, and getting that weight up over the lungs is so much easier from that perspective. And the same thing, we get oh my God, they're so scary. They use backplates. Like, okay, just stop with that. They're not scary. They're made out of metal and they look cool, but yeah, they're not scary. Stop. So we use backplate and wings to kind of compensate for some of that, but that's where our challenges really were in that transition was improper weights. We've got these trim pockets that are just right behind the weight pockets. Those aren't trim pockets. Those are extended weight pockets. Thank you for trying, but the trim pockets should be higher up. So when you start looking at the creation of the BCDs that are especially cheap, like resort BCDs, like the weighting's not in the right spot. So now we got to look at the equipment, and the equipment becomes an issue. So we just took a blanket, like in the transition. Once we started going through the transition, we were like, all right, done. Erase it all. Let's look at our issues. How do we fix all of our issues? And part of that is debriefing and coming back and saying, where are we having problems? How can we fix those every single night? How did tonight go? What do we need to fix? How did the students do? Where are our issues? Is it the person? Is it us? How did we teach? Did we do something different tonight that didn't work? Did we do something different tonight that did work? And how do we replicate that? And that comes from the technical training thing down, that we do a lot of technical training. And that's once we started teaching technical and looking at, well, we do this with really experienced divers. Well, why don't we just start at the beginning and do it right from the beginning? Some of the challenges, like I said, we're just basically, taking the time to do it at the beginning, and then creating a really good foundation so that everything can be built on it and be really good from there.
There's some great points in there I want to pick up on. One, I think, Mark, you mentioned tri-divers do this. This is not rocket science. We take someone in the water and we get them reasonable at buoyancy and get them swimming around on a tri-dive. If tri-divers can do it, open water divers can do it. And I think, you talked about get them down, get them correctly weighted, get them neutral, get them finning around. I think we can shorten that to diving. Let's get them in and get them diving before we start going into all these emergency skills and everything else that we should be teaching them. And I think, summing up what Jason said, a lot of the times the problems seem to be in rolling out this rather than the end result. Once you get the end result, it's actually pretty, I'm not going to say straightforward or easy, but it's doable. But yeah, transitioning between the two, I think, is where people struggle. One question I get all the time, though, when I talk to, you know, I'm preaching to the converted with you guys, and probably a number of the people watching the stream. But there's probably going to be some people that this is new and they're unsure, and they're used to dealing with teaching in the old style. And the question I get asked all the time is, how do you keep control of students? First time in the water, how do you keep control of those students? Anybody want to pick up on that point?
I can start if you want, guys. All right. So in my case, Mark, definitely for hands down, it's in my case, it's structuring your aquatic classroom, so to speak. Rather than having a classroom on land, my classroom will now be underwater. So definitely from the get-go, a solid briefing right before we get into the water, irrespective if we're doing confine number 1 or the last open water dive for the course, or any course, essentially, a solid briefing is definitely needed. So that way we reduce the chit-chat underwater, and that way students can already preempt some of the stuff that I'm going to be telling them underwater. So that's the first thing in my case. Secondly, I also like to draw a lot. In my case, before we get into the water, if, for example, I don't know, I've run out of pencil or my slate is not available, I live on an island, guess what? I find rocks on the ground, and I also draw so that they can actually visualize, just in case I can't explain in any better way, where they will be positioned, etc., and which cookie belongs to whom. Remember, I use a control line and the cookie concept accordingly. And apart from that, I also believe that control of your students is all down to how many you decide to take with you. I mean, I'm not a fan of all these huge open water courses where you see, say, 6, 7, 8, even 9 students sometimes. All right, plus or minus a dive master to support you. I'm just not a fan of that. I actually see myself as a personal coach rather than as an instructor. Why? Because I'm a firm believer that you're coaching someone rather than instructing, because that also instills a mindset that, hey, this person, i.e. the instructor, is actually here to help me achieve my goal. The moment you go with a word of saying instructing, that kind of seems authoritarian, kind of, and that already pushes morale a bit down. So that level of engagement with the student, that you are on their level, all right, you're still responsible for their safety, but hey, guess what? The instructor has come down to the student's level. That also helps me get better control, of the class underwater. And obviously, it facilitates a lot the progression of the skills and the target we want to achieve during the dives that we're doing.
Excellent. Mark, any thoughts on keeping control?
Small classes. We're a very busy dive center, but we tend to do small classes. I'm a firm believer you have 2 hands. That means I've got 2 students. Most open water classes I've done, there's several families last year, which was 4 students. It is more difficult, but 4 is possible. More than 4, I tend not to work with a dive master here, or we're all instructors, so I don't do any more than 4. But generally, it's about control, briefing, and small classes. They're all in front of me, and everybody is literally 1 hand away. That's how close they are. Visibility is good, generally, even in the ocean shallows. But they're literally close to me. If it'll be worse, then we may have touch contact with one or another at all times. I get a bit of surge with waves where I am. I'm on the boat ramp, and therefore some touch contact is necessary between my students and myself, or each other. That also provides a little bit of lateral sideways control. If you're holding hands with your student to your left or right, again, they're not moving anything else. Up and down, breathing, and holding the student to the left or right of you provides you some literal lateral control in the ocean. I'm not in a pool. And after that, everything else that Demis has already mentioned about.
So again, a question, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'd be interested to get your views. Is that I get a lot from instructors is don't the students get task loaded by having to maintain their buoyancy and learning the skills? What if they struggle? And doesn't the emphasis on neutral buoyancy distract from the student being able to learn the subsequent skills. Jason, any thoughts on that?
So our view on that is looking at neutral buoyancy as a skill versus a habit. If you're developing a habit from day one, it doesn't become a actual task loading because you've developed it as a habit. Like, they are working it out. Yes, it takes them a little bit of time. Yes, they're trying to figure this out. But when it becomes a habit, when you're teaching it that way to them, that there's no other option than, really than being neutrally buoyant in trim. If your expectation, you feel natural in that position, and that's the habit you've developed, everything else is skills. That's just a habit. So what we see is when students are waiting for their turn to do skills, they're hovering. Okay, there's your skill is done with what you're normally doing. So it's not a skill for us; it's a habit. We enforce it every single night, every single time they're in the pool, every single time they're in the water, and being reinforced that way. And it's natural for them from day one. They've developed it on their own too, with the breathing and being in trim with their legs up. It's a natural position to them, and that's how they learn it. It's primacy. It goes back to primacy, basically, and developing it as a habit.
Absolutely. I think that's a really important point to bring out, because if you teach mainly on the knees and then you teach the buoyancy skill, and buoyancy is not a skill, you're absolutely right, but you teach the hovering and you teach it for a tiny proportion of the entire dive. And so they get a minuscule amount of practice of buoyancy. But I'm really glad you brought that up, Jason. When the other students in something else, those students are getting, the rest of the students are getting buoyancy, spend so much more time practicing their buoyancy. They'll get an order of magnitude more time practicing teaching this way rather than on the knees. And so, it's all about practice. And I think someone mentioned it in the comments. You only get better at buoyancy by practicing it, but you only get better at buoyancy by practicing buoyancy. So yeah, really glad you brought that point up, Jason. Okay, and I think that answers one of the other questions as well that we get asked a lot. Why not teach the skills on the knees first and then teach neutral? I think we've addressed that in that answer. They don't get as much time. Primacy, I think we've already addressed that. But also, I think a question now I'm going to ask you guys is, are there any differences in teaching the skills neutrally buoyant? And that usually means something close to horizontal versus on the knees, which means something close to vertical. So let's take the two big ones, mask clearing and reg retrieval. What are the differences in teaching those skills? Mark, do you want to start off?
I think the easy one for everybody to visualize is just think about how we do mask clear. Sorry, not mask clear, rather reg retrieval. Reg retrieval, hand, take the regulator out, let go of it. Well, it's going to take a little time under the water, but where's it going to go? It's going to go down to my side, where my hip is. Put my hand on my leg, trace it round, follow it round to my backside to the cylinder, and do a large sweep. Find my regulator, place it back in my mouth, and then continue. Well, if I'm prone in the neutral position, I take my regulator out of my mouth, it's not going to be in my hip. It's going to be somewhere in front of me here. So you can see how that skill developed. There's absolutely a need for that skill, which is the surface reg retrieval skill, which is a very different skill from the diving reg retrieval skill. Yes, it can end up anywhere. Of course it can. But actually, a more appropriate way of finding it, if it's not immediately in front of you, is to reach back and find it. Because wherever it's gone, it's there. If it's not, I'll look at Jason and necklace. Don't worry where it's gone. Put that sucker in my mouth. Now I have time to go and find my regulator wherever it's gone. But I've got a source to breathe. Not necessarily something we're emulating right now, but we do teach primary donate. But we haven't got our backup around our necks at the moment. Mask clear, the big difference in mask clear is either with one or two hands, it doesn't matter, but not with the looking up. look up. Yeah, yes, I need to look straight ahead. Yeah, and I need to be slow, methodical. Yeah, dump the water out. But I don't need to look at the sky, get all the last bits of water out or anything else. It just needs to come down, which is exactly what I'm going to do when we were on that little first swim I talked about earlier. Yeah, swim. All I'm going to say to them is, well, I don't usually have to put any water in their mask. There usually is water in their mask, and I'll just look at them and go, "You clear," and they just don't even think about it. They just hands up, blow, it comes straight out. Yeah, and that's them doing it, swimming around neutrally buoyant, and they've been in the water 15 minutes. And that, when you talk to them afterwards and debrief, they are elated by that. It's a completely different way, and yeah, I see nothing but positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jason, I saw you react when Mark was talking about the mask clearing. Anything you wanted to add to that?
And basically, we do things similarly. There's no longer a swim over, sit down and do your stuff. It's swim and okay, do it. You're diving, right? So do the skill where you're diving. I'm going to have you do that exact same thing. And completely what Mark was saying, that's the exact conversation we have with our students. All right, if the reg comes out of your mouth, this is why you're doing the skill. If the reg comes out of your mouth, you need to be able to retrieve it. If you're in the position we tell you to, it's probably going to be grab it and put it back in your mouth. Like it quite literally is just going to be in front of your face. But the same idea, we're going to teach you just in case, it gets hidden someplace else. But everything what Mark said, we do the exact same stuff and the same reasons. It's easier. We add steps. When you kneel, you add steps. The reg does come down to your hip. Now you got to find it. For us, it's if you roll, you sweep, and it's there. When the mask skills, you have to deal. You look we're adding stuff. You can simplify it by being neutrally buoyant. Actually, I think somebody said it in the comments. Sometimes it actually takes less time because you're not adding all of this garbage of different positions and being inefficient. It's just dive and do the thing, done, and it adds comfort.
Yep.
So,
absolutely. One of my favorites, where we add things, looking up when you're clearing the mask. Why do we look up? We need to look up. If we are swimming horizontally and we've got our head down, we need. And so to encourage that, we tell people to look up, because if they're in this position, they're now doing this. It's not about looking up; it's looking forward. So the mask is vertical. So actually, looking up when you're kneeling is actually making it harder. I think you summed it up perfectly, Jason. We're actually introducing steps that are only required because we're teaching on our knees. Okay. Okay. So that's all great. And moving things around. But what about the standards? And I know the answer. For us, what do the standards say about doing all this? Demis, do you want to take that one?
Can you kindly elaborate a bit, Mark, on the question with regards to the standards?
So, one of the questions I get from instructors is, well, I have to teach things in this order. I can't move things around. I can't, I have to do it this way. I have to teach the skill. I have to do the sweep that way. Does that constrain you in any way?
Well, not really. One of the benefits of me choosing actually to affiliate myself and become a TDI-SDI instructor is that the agency actually allows me as an instructor to take conscious decisions and move skills about vis-a-vis the performance of the student. If I see a student struggling, I don't need to literally hammer it in until the student actually does the skill. What it does is simply accelerate the anxiety, and it will not only do that and affect their buoyancy, but it also will, demotivate them and also induce a bit of frustration from their end. So it's actually counterintuitive. But going back to the point, I think many people are simply too hard focused, case in point the professionals, so I'm referring to instructors and the dive masters here. I think they're simply too hard focused on what that slate is actually telling them. Apart from the fact that you as a professional should be thinking ahead and anticipating what you're going to show to your student and how to react accordingly, I also am a firm believer that we should, all of us, start creating thinking divers from the get-go, So don't if you're normally accustomed to doing it all at the same time, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Occasionally, as Jason earlier mentioned, sit down, go through with your peers, see how you can make things different. And for example, if the regulator drops, your consciousness will tell you, hey, get that regulator back, because guess what? I actually need to breathe from it. But yeah, I mean, in my case, I'm teaching with a backplate and wing system with a long hose. I have this necklace on my bungee. Before I actually fetch that, let me put this up. So now breathing is established again. Then I'll go to it. So that way you're encouraging your students to actually think and not simply do something because that's how their instructor taught them. And that mindset will grow with them as they dive more and progress through their diving career.
Absolutely. Yeah, agree. And it was a bit of a stage question and a bit of a plug for SDI. In that, yeah, we encourage this. SDI encourages that flexibility in the instructors, and that's I think one of the questions. And we'll take a couple more questions from the live feed in a minute. But one of the questions I noticed came up is why aren't agencies promoting this more? You'll notice, I'm wearing the SDI shirt. We're on the SDI Facebook page. I'm going to quote the SDI instructor trainer manual to you now. All skills must be demonstrated neutrally buoyant. I was over in Egypt recently running an instructor trainer workshop, and all the skills were done neutrally buoyant. So this is something that, there are some agencies which are really promoting this. We're not the only one. There are other agencies that encourage or even mandate every single skill neutrally buoyant. So I would say, why aren't other agencies, why aren't all of the agencies promoting this? Let's take some questions from the live stream. So, Brittany, have you got any questions that you've spotted in the feed? Okay, so Mark, I think this is one for you because you teach a resort course. How do you teach buoyancy when you offer a resort course in 2 days over a weekend?
I think I mentioned it earlier, but basically I don't do it in 2 days. Here locally, so our center is SSI, predominantly doing a lot of the recreational. We're also SDI and TDI. Myself, I'm also an instructor for PADI, BZAC, INTD, etc. It doesn't matter. So different standards, different ways. But generally, it's more about water time. So 2 days is too short, in my opinion. That's it. If you want to create a diver that is a lifelong diver, all of us sat in this room and those on the chat, we're lifelong divers. The challenge now is creating new lifelong divers, not people that are learning scuba diving on holiday this year and going mountain climbing next year. I want them to dive next year as well. So how do I do that? It's water time. If they don't feel like a diver, they're not coming diving. Locally, my course is one whole water day longer than all of our competitors. One whole day. And the results speak for themselves. We have a common dive site here, Mark's aware of it, called the Museum Atlantico, where we meet lots of other divers from different dive organizations. And some of those divers, I have to say, they dive badly. Some of our guests that we don't train dive badly. That's why I still believe in the buoyancy course, because it fixes a huge amount of problems that somebody didn't get taught. But for me, question, you can't do it in 2 days. The results aren't good enough. If you want good results, it takes longer.
And you just can't do it in 2 days. Our standards are 4 confined water dives, 4 open water dives, and we can only do 3 dives in 1 day. So that means if you're doing 3 open water dives in 1 day, you're doing 4 confined water sessions and an open water session and all the theory in the other day. You just cannot do it. And I think this is a really good point for the industry as a whole. You cannot do an open water course in 2 days. You can do a supervised diver. We call it. Other agencies might have other names for it. And I think that's an important point. A lot of people don't want the whole open water diver experience. A lot of them, they just want it as a tick the box. So for those divers, let's do the basically extended try dive. Let's give them something that says, oh, you know, I can dive with a dive master, because that's what most of them want to do. The ones who really want to be divers, let's teach them properly. So yeah, in answer to the question, I think we're all in agreement. How would you do it? You just don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instructors that are doing larger or shorter courses, how to incorporate these concepts when you're doing 6 or 8 students in a 2 to 4 day program. 8 students in a 2-day program, just don't do it. I don't see how you can A, meet the standards, and B, create a good diver in that. If you want to do a 2-day program for 8 students, supervised diver, I think Paddy call it scuba diver. Do you want to be a scuba diver? Yeah, I'd love to be a scuba diver. So yeah, open water for 8 students in 2 days. I don't think you can do that in any format, let alone, whether it's on the knees or neutrally buoyant. You are certainly not turning out a diver at the end of that who can dive. I went off on a bit of a rant there, guys. So any 3 of you want to disagree?
No.
Or another question that came up then. So is it commercially viable? I'm looking more probably Jason and Mark. Is it commercially viable to teach this way?
Yeah, I mean, that's we actually have seen there's cars that have got lots of different price points, right? So you maybe need to charge a little bit more. Maybe we're charging too little in the for what we're giving. We've gotten established as, they don't know what they don't know coming as new students. So you're not going to be picked every single time, but we hardly ever get, the way we sell it is we tell them all the things they're going to get. Then we tell them the price, tell them how they're going to do everything, what we're going to do, all the stuff we're going to do for them, and then tell them. The difference is when I say it that way, they say, oh, it's only that much? Yeah, it's only that much. If I come at them with the price and then tell them all the things, they go, oh, it's a lot of money. But we tell them all the stuff we're going to do for them. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to take you on dives. You're going to be neutrally buoyant. You're going to see all this stuff. And they go, oh, that sounds great. And it's only that much money. Yeah, it's only that much money. You would have batted your eye and left if I told you the price first off. So we raise our prices. We look at it, and we looked at the fact that we say, you're going to be with 2 or 4 people. You're going to be in a team with another person. We do a lot with teams. Like this is your team. And you work together as that team. It's going to be small classes. It's going to be big pools. We stress the fact that we use large pools or large bodies of water to actually teach you, so you're not in a little tiny puddle in the back of somebody's shop. That's not how we teach. We want to teach you how to be a diver, so that those costs get increased. But if they want to pay for the benefits of getting a really good course and become a lifelong diver, this is how we do it. And being financially viable, they come back for more courses. They want to take more. They want to buy more stuff. They want to do. So yeah, the first one might take a little bit more to get them in, might take a little more time, but our continuing education is through the roof. And with that, one of the tips I'd like to give, we don't do very much advanced adventure anymore. When somebody comes in to do continuing education, we sit them down and say, what do you want to do? Why? What are you trying to do? And when they tell us they want to go deeper, we go, okay, let's talk to you about getting you into a deep course and what is required. Or I want to navigate. All right, let's do the navigation course. And it puts them into the idea of, these are all the courses I can take now. And they are on that portion of the graphic, and they go that route. But that's a long answer.
And I'm going to give the short answer for Mark as well, because I've been to Rubicon and I've seen how successful it is, and I've seen the amount of repeat business that they get there as well. So this business model is working in the States for Jason, and it's working in Lanzarote for Mark at Rubicon. So yeah, I think you guys have nailed it. Absolutely, it's commercially viable. In fact, I'd even go as far as saying it's the only way that's commercially viable. The pilot high, sell it cheap, produce divers that are not comfortable in the water. That, I think, is the model that's not commercially viable. I think we've got one other question as well. I think I said this was a sales pitch for SDI, which it is. And so I would always encourage instructors to cross over to SDI, because our system is designed to make it easy to teach this way. It doesn't mean that teaching for other agencies means you can't teach this way. I know there are some fantastic PADI instructors who teach this way. So I think one of the comments that a number of guys made earlier about teaching the buoyancy and the first dive, teaching, as Mark said, teach prone and then teach the mask and the reg skills is a way of keeping within the PADI standards. I'm not completely familiar with the PADI standards, so I'm not going to speak for PADI. But yeah, there are PADI instructors who are doing a great job of this. But with SDI, you're positively encouraged to teach this way rather than having to try and squeeze it in. So, Brittany, were there any other questions? I was trying to keep an eye on. Yeah, that's a great point, Dan. Changing the mentality. Naming is a great way. The old way or the new way. I have a half serious slide that I put up, the Jabba the Hutt versus the Jedi way of teaching. So yeah, give it a cool name and people will start doing it. Call the on your knees a bad name and people will stop doing it. Yeah, new way and old way. I like that one. Okay, any other questions? There were lots of comments, lots of discussion around it, but I think they were the good pints, Mark Powell from Scuba Smith. I think you meant points, but I'll take the pints as well.
Yeah, we got pints. I'm down. Can I throw out one other recommendation real quick?
Yeah, please.
Sure. So when we start talking about we engage our students in this whole process. So you got the big slate with all the skills for SDI, right? So this is the SDI. This is one of the things that kind of changed how we do it. We got the big slate and we put their name on the slate, and we bought a bunch of slates because every class has got their slate. So the students see them, and we show them. We do an X in the box. So if they did the skill, but it wasn't neutrally buoyant and really wasn't fluid, and they get a slash, half an X, they get a slash, and they go and they check their cards. Oh, and I got to work on this. Can we work on this? Can we work on this? So they check their cards all the time. They want to see afterwards. They want to see if they got the X. So we'll give them the slash and say, you got some more work to do, and you see them. They're like, can I work on this? Can I work on this? And they're trying to hold their buoyancy. They're trying to do these different things, and they're working on it from as soon as they get that half a slash, and they're checking on it until they get that X, and then they want to practice it after they get the X too. We tell them until it's neutrally buoyant and in trim, you can't get an X, and they just work towards that. That gives them these little tiny goals. And I've never had to, since switching to that, never had to tell someone that they can't go on to mod 2 or the second pool session. I tell them they just have it's individual education program. So they've got their individual education program. They get real-time feedback on what they need to do and where they need to go from there on out. So it's just a little bit of a different mentality, getting them to buy into the system because they can visualize and see what they really need to do. So just a tip.
Mark, can I add 1 point from my end as well, please?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, to tell you a bit more to what Jason mentioned earlier, I'm a firm believer of the concept of also introducing something called value adding. So I know many people find it difficult to enforce this mantra that we all share of teaching neutrally buoyant and in proper trim and etc. If you truly sit down with your students, and again, as Jason mentioned earlier, and you truly show them that, hey, guys, the way we teach here is totally different to how all of our competitors doing. And you show them that for every pound or euro, in my case, that they're going to chuck into their course, show them, even with evidence from your maybe past courses, why they should choose you. because not only will that give them reassurance that their money and resources and time, ultimately, that they're going to invest in you, they'll be getting something back. But ultimately, once they finish that course and you hand over that C card, which I know many people pick up a fuss about, oh, I need to get the C card. It's not just about the C card, guys. It's about future-proofing your development. Be it you want to go up to advanced adventure, maybe side mount, twin set later on, or even rescue, for example. It's all about, again, as Jason mentioned, building up the solid foundation so that you can stack it up as you go up across the ladder.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think I think you posted something on Facebook yesterday or the day before, Demis, about an instructor's CV should be pictures of their students, and I think that's a great way of sort of getting that value over. This is the last open water student I taught. Do you want to look like that? I think it's a great way of doing it. I'm a big fan of saying, my students are my best advert. Look at the student. If you think they look good, they've got good skills, then come to me and I'll teach you. Fantastic. I want to thank you guys for giving up your time and going through these questions. Also, thanks to all of the people who have contributed. Some great questions. John commented about the fact that PADI standards, you can teach this way in PADI standards. Everybody else that contributed, thanks very much. Hopefully, if all the technology worked, this talk will have been saved and will be available as a resource. I know I'm going to watch it again because there were a lot of good ideas that the guys were raising that I'm going to steal as well. So excellent. So again, thank you very much, and thanks to everyone that was watching for taking part. Have a great evening.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.